Okay, hi. Welcome everyone for today's session on open spending. It's a series of it's a series that we're running over these few days to introduce Malaysians to
Our junior lawyer
um,
last time.
the open government action to open government,
Huh?
and
Really?
also um,
She's maybe
in
working with
terms.
this guy,
Just
but
hold on a second.
BBC kind of.
Right. So sorry about that. So okay, I'll start again. To all the people viewing online, welcome to Sinar Project series of webinars on open government partnership. We will be introducing what open government is, as well as open government partnerships and Malaysia's eligibility for it. And as part of the series, we're going to be covering several topics um, from freedom of information, which we heard yesterday, to open budgets, open parliaments, and maybe, if possible, we'll also be covering things such as asset declaration. Today, we're we're quite happy to have Sri Murniadi from Ideas, who'll be joining us in a bit to share Malaysia's status in terms of fiscal transparency. Um, and so, without dealing any further, I'm going to go into a couple of slides to introduce, for those that are joining us for the first time for these series, on what open government partnership is and what are the key areas of what open government is as defined by the open government partnership. So, what is the open government partnership? I'm hoping that works. Um, Sorry. Yeah. So first of all, like, what is the Open Government Partnership? So the Open Government Partnership basically is a global movement that brings together government reformers, society organizations, and citizens to work together on establishing an accountable, transparent government and a government at the citizen's service. Um, so it actually, I think at the moment, I think there's already about 78 countries internationally, which are part of the Open Government Partnership. Um, Unfortunately, Malaysia's not in it yet, and I'll cover some of the reasons for that in a bit. Um, but our neighbors are, two ASEAN countries are actually a member of the Open Government Partnership, Indonesia and Philippines. In fact, they were actually two of the founding members of Open Government Partnership when it launched in 2011. Um, so, um, why isn't Malaysia a part of the Open Government Partnership at this time? Well, to join the OGP, countries must commit to upholding the principles of an open and transparent government um, by endorsing the Open Government Declaration. And through this declaration, the countries will commit to foster a global culture of open government that empowers and delivers for citizens the ideals of an open and participatory 21st century government. Um, if we actually look at the side here in terms of what the Malaysian government has been planning for the past 5 years under the 11th Malaysia Plan, Malaysia's actually has been the what the Malaysian government actually has been working on in terms of improving government delivery is actually quite aligned with these goals. Um, if you look at what they've been trying to address for the past few years, it includes, meeting citizens' needs, like meeting more sophisticated citizens' needs, improving citizen engagement, dealing with the higher or meeting the higher expectations of the younger generations, and a change in technology, culture, and demography. So basically, year on year, we're a much more digitally enabled country, um, and along with high levels of internet penetration. And as such, the Malaysian population is demanding new innovative ways in terms of accessing government service. This is put into more stronger focus in light of COVID-19 and the movement restriction orders, where digital technology and the provision of government services becomes even more important to a functioning country and economy, as well as a functioning democracy. And you can see already that in the middle, the words inclusive digital government and citizen-centric service delivery is pretty much in line with what open government partnership um, goals are. So why isn't Malaysia part of this? Well, the four criteria of OGP eligibility include fiscal transparency, which we will be covering in a bit. And this is basically the timely publication of essential budget documents, the basic building blocks of budget accountability, and an open budget system. Another key pillar of the eligibility criteria of what an open government is and to join the open government partnership is access to information. Um, so we need an access to information law that guarantees the public rights to information and access to government data, which is an essential spirit and practice of open government. And we've covered that yesterday, thanks to our partners at the Center for Independent Journalism. A third pillar of the open government eligibility criteria is the asset disclosure of public officials. So to be eligible for this criteria, Malaysia must have public disclosure of income and assets of elected and senior public officials. And this is the reason for this is that it's an essential part for anti-corruption and to be able to hold the government accountable. And it is important that this data on assets and income of senior public officials and elected officials are available so that citizens can monitor this disclosures. Finally, the fourth pillar is citizen engagement. An open government requires an openness to citizen participation and engagement in policymaking and governance. And this also, of course, includes basic protections for civil liberties. It's not only is required that government engages the citizens, but the citizens must also be able to do so without fear of reprisals or differences in policy or criticisms. So Malaysia right now is actually, as of the 2015 evaluation, is not too far away from being eligible for the Open Government Partnership. In fact, we're just a few points below the minimum threshold for an open government. Two key areas that we score very poorly is on the access to information. We do not have a federal information act at the moment, though one is being drafted, as we learned from yesterday. And also, we do not have a law for asset disclosure. And at the moment, we have very limited asset disclosure of not only the executive government, but also of senior public officials. Which brings us to our topic today for fiscal transparency. So in order for us to have a participatory open government, citizens need to be able to understand exactly where public funds are being spent on, and also to hold where these public funds are being accountable. So, sorry for that. So for Malaysia, so this means that not only does it need to be published, but it also needs to be published in a way that makes it possible for citizens to easily access such information. how much is the government spending on what projects and where and on and how does it look like. So certain things like these are possible if we have, for example, open data on open budgets. But open budgets and expenditure is more than just this. Like, what do we need in terms of for an open budget for us to actually consider Malaysian budget and expenditures transparent and participatory? And for this, we'd like to give a warm welcome to our guest presenter today, which is Sri Murniadi from Ideas, or as she's more commonly known, Uni. She's the research manager at Ideas, and her work covers work on anti-corruption, transparency, governance on expenditures, as well as extractive industries. And she's going to give us a good overview on the state of budget and fiscal transparency in Malaysia. So with this, I'll be handing over the presentation to Uni.
Thank you, Khairil. And I want to thank you for Sinar project for giving us a platform to share our work on open budget. So let me share my slide so I can give a better overview on what these ideas work on this category. So Ideas has been working on open budget since at least 2012. Our works is mainly to encourage the government to improve the quality of information available to the public, to improve the oversight, as well as improving public participation in the budgeting process. So to advocate for this, we use open budget survey as a tool to identify areas of reform. So I'm going to talk a little bit about open budget survey and areas of improvement from open budget survey. Okay. So what open budget survey is? So the open budget survey is international biannual survey that evaluates the first transparency, so the quality of information available to the public participation, as well as budget oversight. It is published every 2 years, sometimes 3 years, by an international organization called International Budget Partnership, with cooperation with partner in countries. In Malaysia, Ideas has been partner since 2015. So the survey was initiated in 2006, if I'm mistaken. Malaysia start joining in 2008. So we have transparency score from 2008 until today. So again, there are 3 pillars of open budget survey. The first one is transparency. So in transparency, we want to see to what extent the government publish 8 budget documents timely and comprehensively. So to what extent that the quality of information presented up to the standard. The second pillar is public participation. So in this one, we evaluate to what extent the citizen participate in the budgeting activities or in any activities related to budget carried out by the government, the executive, by parliament, and also the audit. The third pillar, or the third aspect of evaluated in open budget survey, is the budget oversight. To what extent 2 important institutions, which is audit and parliament, have adequate oversight on the budgeting process. So let's see what Malaysia, okay, I'm going to talk about what is the 8 key budget documents. So budgeting process if you see here the circle, so it is budget cycle. So from preparation and formulation to parliamentary approval, and then implementation and monitoring, and then assessment. So in preparation and formulation, ideally the government publish what is called internationally as pre-budget assessment. Pre-budget assessment is a document that provides a general overview of budget strategy. So what is going to be implemented in the next budget year, and ideally in the next 2 years, and then provide ceiling, sort of an estimate of how much will be needed, from which sources, and are we getting the sources from debt or from other taxes or indirect taxes. So a very general overview of budget. And then during this process, we also have a bigger budget document, which is executive budget proposal, which will be presented to Parliament every October. Usually, and now that they move it to November, we have a budget speech. So the budget speech is part of the document called executive budget proposal. But we also have different documents also tabled in October, economic report or no fiscal outlook. And then we also have revenue, estimates of revenue, estimates of expenditure, or anggaran perbelanjaan persekutuan. And after the Parliament approved, then we have enacted budget. So that's the third document. The fourth document is citizen budget. This is a document, sort of a watered down versions of a very complicated budget, because sometimes if you see the anggaran perbelanjaan, it's very thick. So I don't think everyone has the time to go through it. So the government can create a document called citizen budget. So the OBS will evaluate whether the citizen budget is simple enough, and whether it's easy to access, and whether there's information, like where can we get the information from. So the fifth document that's also evaluated is what we call as in-year reports. So during the implementations of the budget, ideally the government has to update to the public how much money has been used from the budgeted, from the budgeted expenditures, whether it's on their target, or it's below target, or it's beyond target. In some countries, in Malaysia, the in-year reports are published quarterly. You can check the Treasury website. In other countries, they publish it monthly. So they will update how much money has been used, how much revenue has been accumulated, and how much debt has been raised. And then also we have what's so-called media review. Media review is the document that's more comprehensive. So you will be able to see whether budget or supplementary budget is needed. So right now we have media reports, but it's not publicly available. And then the other two important documents that the government ideally publish is year-end report. In Malaysia, it's a penyata keuangan. So this is reporting what's been spent, what's been collected in terms of revenue, what's the debt, what's the contingent liabilities, provide basically reports on the budget implementation. And the last one, of course, the one that we're familiar with, is audit report. So the open budget survey for transparency, we evaluate these 8 documents, whether they are up to international standard or not. So what is Malaysia OBS score? I think Khairil actually presented this earlier, so thank you. So in terms of transparency, for 2019, this result actually was published in April this year. So transparency, we only get 47 out of 100. So this means Malaysia still have limited information available to the public. For public participation is still low, 17. And then budget oversight is 31. But in early this year, we also, so this, the 2019 score actually evaluate budget documents or budget practices in 2018. So these results, the 47, 17, and 31, do not cover any practices happened during the Pakatan Harapan. So ideas took initiative to evaluate the budget documents published in 2019, which is during Pakatan Harapan period. And but we only evaluate transparency. So we see improvement in terms of score. So right now it's projected, if we have actually a survey in 2020, Malaysia is projected to have a score of 52 in terms of transparency. So that's a good improvement. So let me go through a little bit on why this score is quite low. So this is transparency score over the years from 2008 to 2020. So it's quite good improvement. We start in 2008 from 35, now 52 over how many years? Yeah, almost more than, I guess, 12 years. Good improvement, I think. So this is, if we want to see what it looks like in terms of quality for each budget document. So PBS is not published, so we don't know the quality, so it's 0. But executive budget proposal is 57. 57 means we have still limited quality of budget documents. For enacted budget, it's quite high, meaning the budget is actually available to the public. And then we have in-year reports, still also very low. I think the one that is actually quite good is Laporan Ketua Audit Negara, which is Audit Report. So that one actually in ASEAN or in East Asian countries, Malaysia's score is quite high for Audit Report. Then this is the oversight. So the audit oversight, again, because of the report, actually quite high. But legislative or parliament oversight is still low. I think during Pakatan, we have a slight improvement because we have budget select committee. Budget select committee actually provide a good oversight on the budget implementations. And we're hoping that we will have this budget select committee in the current government as well. And this one is public participation. So the public participation, Malaysia is not alone. So globally, the public participation level is not adequate. Here we actually measure public participation in 4 areas of budget, in 4 budget cycles. So in formulations, it's still good. But for approval, during legislative sessions, it's still low. And also during audit process, it's still low. And the last one, so I want to share, I think one of the questions that Khairil actually posed to us is, with the change of government, what is the status of this? Because I think during Pakatan Harapan, open budget is part of the pledge. So they want to actually improve the score to 60 from 46. So that's the election pledge. But since the change of government, what are we going to do with this reform? So I think for ideas is we will remain committed to encouraging the government to do this thing, to improve the open budget. So to publish media review. Actually, last year, the government submitted the report to Budget Select Committee. So by right, this document is actually publicly available. And also to publish pre-budget statement, to improve the executive budget proposal. And we also call for the government to continue parliamentary reforms, to improve budget oversight, and of course, improve mechanism for public participation. But in the meantime, I think, we believe that open budget or government will be able to do or to take this initiative if there's a demand from the public. So meanwhile, we continue we're trying to provide more information to the public on the open budget. So if you check ideas, social media, we've been producing infographic to provide the public information on what open budget is, making some budget documents more easily accessible to public. So please check out our social media, and we also welcome any inputs on what kind of information that should be provided to the public. So thank you, Khairil.
Thanks, Uni. So with this, we open it up to the public for questions. You can leave the comments on our YouTube channel or Facebook or in the chat. Meanwhile, while we're collecting some questions, I have some questions for Uni. So,
Kyril, can you give me just 1 minute?
Okay, sure. No
I'm gonna
worries.
mute this for a bit.
Okay, yeah. So we'll hold on for that. I think Uni has to look after her child for a moment. So if we just have a recap just now, we saw certain documents that are still not available that we need to participate in. And I'm gonna wait a little bit for Uni to get back to us. But there's so those key 4 documents that Uni just shared, we need these things published in order for us to be able to, in order for the public and also media to actually participate and question.
Sorry.
What's been happening. So okay, great. So yeah, we'll have Uni back here. So I've got some questions for you. So just now on your last slide, you mentioned that public participation is very low. Can you clarify a little bit on what is needed to improve public participation, and what kind of mechanisms does open budgets expect the government to provide to increase the citizen participation score?
So public participations in open budget survey, actually, the expectations is to have these 3 institutions important in budget to have this mechanism. So one is by executive, which is the MOF and also line ministries. The second one is by legislatures or by parliament, either Dewan Negara or Dewan Rakyat, and then by audit. So right now, the public participation by executive or the MOF and line ministries is quite okay. It can be improved, but it's better. But legislative, it's very minimum because, of course, the budget select committees meetings are not open for public, and then there's no mechanism for, say, during the budget approval, where the parliament can invite expert, for example, to weigh in on the conversation about the budget. So we don't have that. And audit, while it's open to input from the public on what kind of project, for example, want to be audited, it's not a formal mechanism. So I think from my interview with the audit, the public actually can propose on what kind of project or government program that they want it to be audited. So you can send it through Facebook, through emails. They may not be able to respond to everything, but I think they're open to that suggestions. But in our evaluations, we want the audit to have a more formal mechanism involving, I think, CSO. I think in other countries, for example, there's a so-called citizen audit, where a CSO actually play a little more active role in helping the audit doing their jobs, either suggesting the program or audit program, and also investigations. But also in public participations, there are 2 important principles. The first one is whether this participation is meaningful. When we said meaningful, is first whether you provide comprehensive information, like what is the scope, what's the constraint, what do you want to get out of this, how do you expect, what are you going to use our input for? So this information ideally should be put forward. I think we have that now, some of it, but it can be improved. So the second one is, this is the most important thing, to provide the public reports on how do you use this input from. I think right now we have that as well, but it's very patchy. Say, for example, in previous budget, the government mentioned that one of the budget allocation was actually put in the budget because they saw this idea from the budget website, the consultation website that they set up before the budget approval. So that's good, but it's not comprehensive enough. So OBS requires a little bit more work from the government to improve the public participation.
So, okay, cool. Questions are coming in. I have also other questions. So you mentioned that there's a lack of legislative oversight. And you've also introduced us, to some key documents that seem to be able and published according to your survey. So one question I have is that on legislative oversight, quite often we have what we call supplementary budgets or additional budgets bills being tabled in Parliament. And quite often these are quite substantial, sometimes up to several billion ringgit. With very few details. Are the details of these additional supplementary budgets bills tabled in Parliament, are they disclosed in some of those documents that you shared were published?
Actually, supplementary budget, yes. So if every year, almost every year, the government actually tables supplementary budget after the budget year ends. So I think recently, about 3 weeks ago, the Dewan Rakyat passed supplementary bill for 2019. So in June, the information about the details actually is in Parliament website. It's called Kertas Perintah. So the supplementary bill itself actually only cover supply, which is part of the operating expenditure. Operating expenditure has two elements. One is tanggungan or discharge expenditure. That one is not deliberated. There's one charged to consolidated fund automatically. The second one is supply. So the supply supplementary bill is being deliberated by the Parliament, and it's passed a supplementary bill act, a supplementary supply act. I'm sorry. The detail of this, there's a document called Kertas Perintah, but it's slightly tricky to find that document. So you have to, it's not seen directly in the heading. But if you type Kertas Perintah supplementary budget, I think you will be able to find it in Parliament website. I'm hoping that in the future, of course, this is a dream for every researcher, to have all these documents available in machine readable format. Right now, everything is in PDF. So if you want to do analysis, you have to, of course, do certain magics that Khairil did, or like me, to just data entry one by one. Yeah.
Yeah, on the machine readable part is actually a very important point. So even the budget that's tabled, there are actually, pages and pages of PDF, about 45 pages maybe, or maybe more for each ministry.
Yes.
And at the moment, this is extremely difficult for people to report and discuss. Even if you see the news on budget breakdowns when a budget is budget is being tabled in Parliament and made available publicly, newsrooms actually have to spend the whole night with a dedicated team to enter all the data manually. So this is something that definitely needs to be improved for citizens' participation, like to actually have it in a machine readable format, such as a spreadsheet. So I've got another tough question here for you before we go on some more engagement issues. So IDEAS has done a lot of work in terms of oversight, for example, into government-linked companies and as well as government-owned companies under the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. So these can be quite substantial in terms of their expenditure and their debts that are raised, but these expenditures, I don't think, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, come under existing budget mechanisms that you have just shared. Is this a problem, given the amount of scope and amount of money being involved, such as contingent liabilities? And does the open budget mechanism be able to address this for the Malaysian situation?
The GLCs, GLCs is a very broad term, I think, because some of the GLCs are or subsidiaries of what's so-called the statutory bodies. Some are actually just registered to companies' commissions. Some of them receive directly from the budget. So by right, they will be audited by the Auditor General. And statutory bodies actually should submit annual report to Parliament. So the information about expenditures, liabilities, actually it's there. So if we want to know what certain statutory bodies performance in terms of budget or in terms of expenditure or revenue, their annual statement actually quite good place to go. In terms of liabilities you mentioned earlier. So yeah, so some of this expenditure, I think in public finance management calls off budget. So yes, some of the statutory bodies receive certain amount of money from budget, but they also raise their own funding, from either from debt or from their own businesses. So these are not counted fully in anggaran perbelanjaan. But I think there is a little bit of information. If you go to Fiscal Outlook report, the so-called Consolidated Public Finance Report. So it will show some of the expenditures and revenues from a very aggregate. It's not disaggregated. We don't know from which sources it is, but you can show that in aggregate, how much is the revenue from statutory bodies or non-financial institutions or GLCs, basically. But it's very big number. So for detail, we have to go, of course, one by one to each annual report. But one of the information that we've been trying to get from the government is, I think right now we have information about contingent liabilities in budget documents. There is some information, so it's good. What we are trying to get the government to publish is the estimates for the current year and the, at least for the next 2 or 3 years. Right now, every year, they only publish contingent liabilities for previous year. So we do not know what is the risk for the government in the next 5 or 10 years, because they don't publish the estimates. So this is what we are trying to push as well, including the recent stimulus package, for example. Yes, they tell us the amount of the estimates of how much is needed from the budget, but we don't know what's the source, and of course the estimates whether this will be happening in the next 1 year or 2 years or 3 years. Yeah, so this information is still something that still lacks.
Okay, we've got a question here from the public, Richard. So he asks, what can we, as citizens or civil society, or media, and or even or even civil servants, like maybe not civil servants, but what can we do to either to enforce or to pressure the government to publish the necessary documents that you mentioned were missing or inadequate?
I think right now, in my view, it's I think we should use what is available yet. What is available now. I think right now, I just actually attended this meeting this morning called PEMNA. So PEMNA is an association of this public expenditure practitioner. So some of them from government being there. So one of the points I think that I can take from that, the government sees that the public actually demand for transparency, but they do not really use the data. So one of the things that I think to create this demand to actually try to use the information that is actually available now, and from then we can demand for more information. We are trying right now. So I think for me, it would be good if more organization or individual actually join us, and also organization like Sinar project to demand for this. Then if more voices are heard, more data are being used, I think that the government will actually publish more information. That's my view, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. So yeah, and actually to end on that question, so you've just shared us like a lot of amazing work, in terms of all these documents that even I didn't know, and I'm monitoring government transparency. So how can us, the public, civil societies, or like recently a lot of the youth movements and students, like um, how can we find out more about this, and the work that Ideas is doing on this issue?
I think we're more than happy to. Ideas has we actually want to have a more and more organization to look into the budget. We will have some program on subnational. We want to have to also monitor budget transparency in state level, because I think that's also a big chunk of money there. So more and more organizations and individuals who knows the budget to actually come up. So we are more than happy to be the partner. We do not publish all our works. We have some policy reports, but I think most of this information can be shared through training. We're more than happy to assist or to help anyone who wants to understand or to know the budget documents. To provide training, we're more than happy to do that.
So if, let's say, I'm a journalist covering budget, I can approach Ideas.
Yes, of course.
So, okay, that's awesome. We do have one question. I think might be the last one before we wrap up the session. There's a question from Dev, and they ask, we've got a really high score on the National Audit Report, like 91 out of 100. And it covers a lot of leakage of funds for various programs. So how would, for example, the financial transparency of budget expenditures, how can these help address some of the issues or the leakages in the audit reports? Maybe because maybe even before it happens, like how would it help?
I think it's really difficult. Audit report actually provide sort of a post implementation, but so sometimes government will take these suggestions and improve, but of course it may happen again. But I think one of the good thing about that is at least we have quite robust audit process. So there is leakage, but we also know that we can actually do something. So in terms of how actually transparency will be able to help preventing the leakage. I think right now is the problem. We do not have robust citizen monitoring on the budget implementations. So if we have, for example, we know that certain procurement projects, say infrastructure project is being carried out, then usually if we can have informations about how much is the budget for this, some actually in certain projects they're being disclosed. So if we can have more active involvement in monitoring this, and it will help. So we match the budget document, for example, infrastructure project for this year, for this particular ministry is this much, and you want to see how much is that actually being implemented in your area, then we can start monitoring it from there. So transparency help, I think, preventing leakage, because it provides us a tool to monitor the project implementation. So, and later the audit will actually audit that particular project. And if we are being proactive, I think we can actually send this information to the audit, and maybe that will help their audit program as well.
Wow, that's amazing.
I hope that answered the questions.
Yeah. Yeah. So my concern is this is like, let's just say I'm a citizen and I want to know how many hospitals or government clinics are being, are planned to be built in my area this year. or what's the status of, for example, is there water infrastructure projects, and say like what's being planned for this year. So in order for us to monitor this, where would we find such information?
That's another, actually, that's the level of transparency is quite high. Right now, the budget document only disclose information in departmental level. So we will not know the informations about, say, for example, how many hospitals are we being built now. But if there is another information that actually quite useful, is annual report of ministries. So annual report of ministries will have some informations about the post implementation and also future implementations. So these also considered budget document, but not the main budget documents. But there are, for example, for health, if you look into certain expenditure, there will be informations about at least not building the hospital, but paying, for example, paying hospital supplementary services, which is mostly paid through concession system. So that information is actually available in the budget document. But of course, in terms of details, our budget documents is still limited. So the OBS only takes a very general, so a standard for the purpose of comparative with other countries. So it's a very basic disclosure. So a detailed disclosures is of course encouraged, but it's very rare. So for example, if you look into the anggaran perbelanjaan persekutuan, for example, there's this codes 10,000, 20,000. So the 20,000 is for supply and services. That covers a lot of types of expenditure, but we do not know what is it. So it's just said assets or supplies and services. But what kind of purpose under that? We have to, then I guess here, then the FOI is important. Then we can ask for more information about the budget, because right now what's disclosed to the public is very minimal.
And I think that's a challenge because
yes,
I know for you can know from the existing budget documents, that, oh great, there's going to be 200 million ringgit spent in my area for development, but what on what? So in order for us to monitor it, we need those details. So it's like
we need this detailed information. Yes.
Yeah. So it makes it difficult for public participation for that. I will have some mechanisms on this tomorrow on Open Legislative, on one possible ways of getting this information.
True.
So before we end this, could you share with us some contacts, on how to get in touch with you and ideas for the people watching?
Oh, I don't have it in my slide, but I think you can reach me out in uni at ideas.org.my, UNIE, at ideas.org or .my. Yeah, that's my email address. You can also access our website, which is still being revamped, but the contacts, everything's are there.
Okay, great. So there, so that's a lot to cover in just, about for such a complicated topic in for the last 40 minutes or so.
And I hope it's useful.
Yes, it's very useful. Even for me, I'm learning a lot. I learned a lot about where to find some of these documents and what about budget documents that we, the public, should demand access to and start reviewing as well if they're available. So with that, thank you so much, Uni from Ideas, for making the time to share your amazing work on open budgets with us. So thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Have a good day, everyone.
Yeah. For the rest of our viewers, our seminar, a series of seminars will continue tomorrow. At the same time, and we will be covering tomorrow on open parliament and access to legislative assemblies for each state. And for those, we'll be covering some of those things on certain mechanisms, like for accountability, for example, in using or engaging with your elected representatives to ask questions in Parliament on exactly what projects are being planned for your area and getting more detailed information about them. So yeah, with this, thank you to all of our viewers. This is recorded. So we will publish a recording of this for those of you who could not make it, who cannot watch it or would like to review some of the a ton of information that Uni just shared very quickly. So yeah, we will have this recording online for you to review. Thank you.